Hey TV fans, this is going to be my review of A Murder at the End of the World, Episode 3. It is called Survivors. Full spoilers from the start of this review. And this is another good episode which fills in a few blanks, but also poses some interesting questions. So it's one of those episodes where it definitely has that puzzle book type feel, but once again, there's some really strong, powerful visual moments in this episode where the location of this show is really well used, and there's some dramatic, tense moments too that are really stand out. So it's a big one for the dynamic between Lee and Darby, because it becomes clear that Darby at first doesn't really trust Lee in this episode. There's this event, this gathering in the library where Sasha sings a song, and it's a little bit of a scattershot type scene because Lee is talking to various people. She talks to Rohan, who's someone who plays a big part in this episode. He's someone who, it turns out, knew Bill quite well and was quite a big fan of his work. And it takes a while for this stuff to come out, but it seems as though they were planning on working on a project together. Because one thing we learn a bit more about is Bill's involvement in pro-environmental type projects. So he was very much interested in developing art installations which focused on climate change, that kind of subject. And because of that maybe puts him at quite an opposing end of the whole technology thing, though there's definitely positives to technology when it comes to climate change, but it does put him in this interesting in-between position. And if he was maybe at conflict with Andy and his vision for technology, which is suggested he could have been in this episode, then that's something to consider. But Darby tries to talk to Rohan in this library scene, and he is a little bit cryptic, and then she's interrupted by Lee anyway, and they talk about the footage, and Darby claims she didn't see anything out of the ordinary on there, which Lee doesn't really believe her. So, but then Darby's like, you could have just checked this yourself. And you can tell at this point they're not the most trustworthy of each other. Darby also, she's interrupted by Andy, who makes a point of saying then Bill and Lee know each other from Chicago. They work together there, and that's where they first met. And throughout the episode we get more information on their relationship from the past. But Darby then talks to the waiter from the previous night, because she hears about there being cups of tea delivered to Bill's room. So she tries to talk to him about how many cups to get a sense of how many people were there. But he's kind of nervous and standoff and leaves. And then you get this event where Sasha sings a song, and it's quite emotional, and then suddenly these masks all appear to Darby. All the guests appear to her wearing these masks. So once again, it's a question of if this is in her head and it's just part of her paranoia, or if there's some sort of AI technology making this happen to her, to freak her out. But she later follows the waiter and questions him in the kitchen, And once again, this episode does a good job of showing her good instincts as like a private detective, and her starting to piece together what she can. And the waiter again is nervous because he points out then like he could be at risk if they found out he was giving her information. He says he was flown in from Berlin, and he eventually said then there was 3 cups delivered that night to the room. And Lee also observes like a plan on the wall of like the different guests. And she then goes back to her room and she talks to the AI once again, and it like gives her information about each guest's internet history, like, and if there's any links on social media to Bill. And first of all, there's only like internet history dating back a week, or like, yeah, a week. So no history before then. So that's something. But it turns out pretty much all the guests have some sort of a history with him, and that's where Johan, she finds a link there. Then he responded to Bill online and has a history, and she's convinced that he is like a suspect at this point, because he did have like an emotional reaction when Bill's death was announced. And it's a little bit cryptic again on Andy and what his involvement is. But the first like big suspenseful scene is then Darby notices someone in one of these masks walking out like during the night. So she starts to follow him or her, and it's a really tense scene because it's like all pitch black and it's her on like a mountaintop following this person but at a distance. And at one point the person stops and the person starts using Morse code with a torch, a light. So this is a nice callback to the last episode where it was set up in the past that Darby understands Morse code, and so that's the purpose of this person taking the walk. And we later find out that it's Rohan and that he's doing it to give her a message, but a more discreet way. And the message is then it seems to indicate like 1 down, 2 to go. So it seems to imply then the intention is to kill 3 people, 3 of the guests. But at the same time, because we later find out that this is Rohan, or appears to be Rohan, it seems that it's unlikely then he's the killer, because why would he be giving this information? And he did it discreetly. So the next day they go on this hike, and this is the other big, like, really visually stunning scene. Them going on this hike, and once again you've got Darby being very, like, careful and just approaching Rohan, really, like, subtly and talking to him. And again, he's edgy about speaking to her, but he slowly opens up and gives the little pieces about the history with him and Bill. And eventually they get to this scene, and there's this sequence of this robotics like design which one of the guests has come up with, and it's that really douchey arsehole who's just so full of himself. But he has come up with these robotic carriers that can carry food to different locations, and that can almost fill in for if a person is, like, I guess, snowed in or trapped in to a place and, like, can't get access to food. Like, you can almost send these robotic things. So it's another really great visual moment, actually. But later on, you get a good bit of drama when they're in, like, this cabin, and Darby is just sitting there for ages, and she keeps like watching each pair of boots, and it's because she clocked the previous night what boots this person was wearing. And again, it's a really great suspenseful moment because she keeps zoning in on those boots, just waiting for someone to take them. And eventually it is Rohan. And that's when they have had a talk. And Darby at this point is convinced that he killed him. And she says the message back and says, hey, yeah, you killed him. And with this being episode 3, it seems a bit too early for that to be confirmed. And he gets a bit emotional and says, you're out of line, I would never harm that boy. And this is what causes Andy later to tell Darby to leave, because I can't have you upsetting the guests, is how he puts it. And there's some solid scenes with Andy again building his character in this episode, because he says at one point, he uses this analogy about Walt Disney and the vision that he had to build like Disney World and that kind of thing, and that sort of came from an idea of using like technology and almost like creating a theme park where the characters would come to life almost in a 3D style. So once again, he's being the promoter and philosophizing and putting these ideas out there to try and impress Darby, because we see more of his son in this episode, and like he's got one of these 3D headsets and he gives it to Darby, and he's got this game where you chase something that appears on the headset. So once again, it's getting quite deep into like the realm of virtual reality and 3D and that kind of thing. But yeah, Andy is quite stern with Darby. Says, no, you've got to leave. We can't have you upset the guests. And he also gives an answer to one of the questions which he puts to him, and that is then we're aware that someone went to Bill's room. We've got the same footage you do, but it wasn't that person who killed him. It was a suicide, and that's because the toxicology results confirms then the injection was already in Bill's blood before that person got to the room. So that person was not responsible. It was a suicide. And Andy's sticking to that story and insists that Darby leaves, says, we've got a plane ready for you. And once again, you can guess that Darby, by the end of the episode, isn't going to leave. But it definitely leads to some good drama and suspense at the end of the episode. And I'll talk about the Lee stuff briefly, because that stuff is pretty crucial as well, where Lee comes to talk to Darby. Now, they're definitely doing a good job of keeping you guessing whether Lee can be trusted or if she might have had something to do with what happened to Bill, because she brings her son to the room, and this implies, the two scenes with the son imply that he could be quite crucial. I know there's a theory online that he could be Bill's son, which I think that could be a possibility. I'm not sure if I would be that into that, because it just seems like that's a bit of a cliche, but we'll see what happens with that. But another thing is, it does seem that Lee could be a much more subtle manipulator than she's like letting on, than it could be than she's actually a really good actor. And I quite like this idea that she, more than anybody else, could be the one to manipulate Darby into trusting her, and Andy by extension, because like Darby is her biggest fan. And another thing that occurred to me was then bringing the son to Darby's room, because she says he's really tired, he needs a sleep, and she says later on, is it alright if he sleeps in the room, because he's pretty much asleep, can I leave him asleep for a while? And Darby's like, yeah. So yeah, I did wonder if maybe it was a way to manipulate Darby, like use the son to kind of get her on side. But we get a little bit more in this scene. Lee is still like quite cryptic, but she talks more about the relationship with Bill, and Darby questions, were you two seeing each other? And she claims it was never romantic. She just says they really bonded because they had a similar idea about technology, like a similar fear about future technology, and they were interested in working together on a project when it came to this stuff. And she also says, like, Bill spoke really highly of Darby and was talking a lot about her, and because I think this is meant to be in the window after Bill and Darby had like split up, so he apparently had that really on his mind. But this is a really effective scene. It does a good job of like fleshing out Lee a bit more as a character, but also putting this question of, can we really trust her? Like, is she manipulating Darby, or is she being upfront with her? Because I quite like the idea that maybe she could be the mastermind of this whole thing, rather than Ray. Like, maybe Ray's being a bit more straight and not as, not quite the master manipulator than you might think he is. Clive Owen is really good in this episode too, I've got to say. He does a good job of being intimidating in short sort of bursts. But yeah, I do like the intrigue and the dynamic between Lee and Darby. So the big dramatic end of the episode is then Darby is being kicked out basically by Ray, not Ray, Andy from this retreat. And before she is, because someone comes to get her, and she tries to send Ray an email just to send him a message, then she's not leaving. She'll be keeping the room for the time being, and apparently she can't reach Ray on email, so she leaves the voice, or she calls his like reception or his assistant or someone like that, and like that person says that he can't be reached right now, so she leaves a message. And then she, like, when someone comes to pick her up, she sort of peels off and goes into a room, and she's actually contacted by Rohan, sorry, I keep doing that. And he's about to tell us something crucial, because he says Bill was working on something and he was about to tell me. And of course we're not going to find out this early, because Rohan then appears to be attacked, like he starts choking. Now, it's revealed earlier in the episode that he's got a heart issue. So it appears as though, because by the end he's dead, but it appears as though maybe he just had a heart attack. But it's obviously very suspicious, because he was about to give Darby an important piece of information about Bill, so it seems a little bit more suspect than him just having a heart attack. But one thing I picked up from this was that Darby quickly rushes to his room, Rohan's room, and he's not in there. And she then goes to the hall because there's a lot of commotion, and that's when they find Rohan laying there, and he dies, basically. So it occurred to me then, because he phoned her and she rushed to his room, But then there was this commotion on the other end of the... It occurred to me that maybe there's an AI at work here. Then maybe they set up Johan's voice, like they recreated it to sort of fool Darby. Like, I'm not quite sure why, but it just occurred to me then that could be the reason why he wasn't in his room. Like, maybe it buys them some time to do whatever they were doing, because it then meant then Darby shot off to his room and didn't see... Like, if there was more to it than just his heart attack, then I guess she wouldn't have seen it then. There was less chance of her actually seeing what they were doing, but that's just something I thought. I'm not sold on the idea, but I thought it was possible, because there's just something particular about the fact that he was talking to her on the telephone and then mysteriously he dies, so maybe it could be another use of AI. But yeah, it was very nicely done, and now it brings into question, like, the questions are going to continue from Darby even more now, because Johan's dead and Bill's dead, so that's two people, and they had a connection. And, like, definitely up to a point, they've managed to put a concrete explanation for Bill, and again, they can kind of do that with Johan, but it's still suspicious because two people have died in a matter of days. And now you've got this snowstorm which is going to snow them in, and that means Darby can't leave at this point. So Bill says underground. Not Bill, sorry, Andy says underground. And it's this great final line, which is almost like a double thing where, well, we're going underground because of the snowstorm, but I think it could also be then, shit, this is serious, we've had another death, let's go underground type thing. But good stuff, good drama once again, and there's a little bit in the flashback with Bill and Darby continuing to investigate this serial killer and murder, and they realise then he started to leave these things, these silver things like jewelry at the site of the victims. So they find another one earlier in the episode, and they go to talk to this victim who survived the killer, and it's once again just another example of them wanting to do the right thing, because this victim paints a pretty negative picture of the police, saying they didn't really care, and they just wanted to wrap the case up really without putting much thought into it, and just that they weren't very sympathetic. And she assumed then really they were going to be the same, that being Darby and Bill, but they reassure her then, no, they're going to see this through, they're going to do everything they can to catch the killer. And once again, Darby's character and her morality is very well sold in this, because another thing with Lee is that Lee wants to hire her to find the killer, and she offers her money, and Darby is again, no, I'm an amateur, I don't accept money, I do this stuff because I believe in it. So that's very, very interesting, because you have this picture of Darby really struggling to make money, and in a way she definitely, with her skills, could make at least a half decent living from private detective work, but no, she has this morality where she wants to do it for free. Like, she feels it's the right thing to do to bring people to justice and to help victims and get to the bottom of stuff. So the Lee and Darby stuff, definitely the highlight, and some really tense, suspenseful visual moments as well. So that's Murder at the End of the World, episode 3. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Another current streaming show that I'm doing is The Curse from A24 and Showtime, the sort of mockumentary satire starring Emma Stone. So I'm reviewing that weekly too. Look out for those reviews. Check them out if you're watching that show. And for something a bit lighter and more retro, me and Rachel, my regular co-host, are also doing Gilmore Girls, and we're on season 2 at the moment. So if you're a fan of that show, check out those reviews. And you can also support me monetarily on patreon.com/boardnow. Just $1 a month. You get early access to film or TV reviews sometimes. You also get movie and TV commentaries. So I do commentaries on the X-Files quite regularly. I also do movie commentaries, sometimes on a theme. So with the Christmas season upon us, I will be doing some special Christmas commentaries. And you also get access to exclusive discussion, unpopular opinion type videos as well. So just $1 a month on patreon.com/boardnow. Thanks for listening. Keep watching TV. See you later, guys.